Hey everybody out there, my name is Dragnix, and another Final Fantasy 15 video. Dragnix, didn't you just do an hour-long review, which you can see here, and a short version of that for people who didn't really want to watch it for an hour? Yes, I did, but you have to understand something. I put over 200 hours into that review, and I did cut a bunch from the review itself. The fact of the matter is this, yes, it was an hour long, but I went through every single detail of the game, even down to the little itty-bitty things that people probably are interested in, but when it came to buyability, it didn't really affect the score either way. One of the bigger complaints I had about Final Fantasy 15 was the missing elements of the game. I'm not talking about the overall content, because there's a lot of content here, over 100 hours worth. But the thing was that even with that said, there was stuff that was seemingly missing. For example, Gladio in the middle of the game goes off to a specific mission on his own. He comes back with a scar over his eye, and his mood has changed a little bit. You end up having him, confront Noctis and be a little bit more, I don't want to say aggressive, but be a little bit more of a father figure to him in certain ways, pushing him. And I wanted to know exactly what caused that. What did he do on that mission that caused him to have this revelation or this emotional change? Well, in this case, it looks like we'll be getting our answer via the Season Pass DLC, but that's a rant for a whole nother day. I've always said the devil is in the details when it comes to video games and their stories, and part of that is the references in the Final Fantasy series. You can find them in pretty much every game, and Final Fantasy 15 is no exception. So what I want to do is point out some of the references that I see, but not only that, see if there's symbolism behind it. Is it just a reference to a character or a place in the game? Or is it a little bit more with the interpretation of what that old thing was into this new world? The first place I want to start is Lestalem. It's one of the bigger cities that you can actually get quests from in the game, and frankly is got a lot in it. First of all, this shop that you can't interact with, and specifically these posters. Okay, let's take a look at this first poster. Mama Ada's Organic Butter. So this is just an in-game advertisement of a fake store within the game, right? Well, it could be. Or it could be a reference to Ada Kramer from Final Fantasy VIII. Oh, you don't know who that is? Maybe you remember her as Sorceress Ada, or Matreon, aka Japanese for Mama Sensei, and hence where the mama part comes in this advertisement. But you probably remember her in her other form, when she's possessed by a sorceress from the future. Ultimecia. Yes, one of the main bad guys from Final Fantasy VIII. But okay, a nice little name reference, right? There's absolutely nothing else in this poster that has symbolism in it. The fact that I'm asking you that question means that yes, there is more symbolism within this poster regarding to Ada. Okay, organic butter. Well, what does butter symbolize in a lot of cases? When you think of butter, you think of fat. You think of gluttony. You think of over-consuming. You probably shouldn't have too much butter on something. It could give you a heart attack, for example. Well, let's think about the character of Ada, in particular, her alternate form, Ultimecia. One of the key traits of Ultimecia is that she's power hungry. She wants to rule the universe. She wants to rule the world. She wants to rule over everything. Just having a city, just having a continent, for example, that's not enough for her. She wants more. Doesn't that sound a little bit like gluttony? AKA you want more, even though you don't need it? And thus, that's the symbolism of the butter part of that poster. It is a nice little bow on top of the little reference that they put here. Yes, people who haven't played the Final Fantasy series will probably miss that and not think anything of it. But for a fan of the franchise, they may see that poster and may be reminded of that game. They may be reminded of all the events of that game, in particular Ada and Ultimecia, and they will appreciate what this one poster has to offer in terms of symbolism if they see it. I certainly did. But okay, maybe I'm just pulling that out of my ass. I mean, it's just a poster in the game. It's not like the poster under it has Final Fantasy references and symbolism in it. Yes, it does have Final Fantasy symbolism and actual explanation of events in the game that it's talking about within that own poster. Okay, Uncle Randall's ice-cold root beer. Randall. Who had the name of Randall in the Final Fantasy series? Well, there's a specific game, Final Fantasy Tactics A2 Grimoire of the Rift. In particular, there are two characters, Mute Randall and Sid Randall. Okay, fine, but what about the root beer portion? What does that stand for? Well, it's a little bit of a different kind of symbolism here. Root beer is something that is non-alcoholic in nature, despite the fact that it has the word beer in it, which is usually alcoholic in nature. That's a reference to Sid Randall, in particular what happened to him. His wife in the game, Remedy, died, and he went into this horrible, horrible depression, and in particular, a drunken stupor. He was a mess of a man. Now, some people may not remember this, and there's good reason for that. In the US version of the game, his depression from the death of his wife is downplayed, but in the Japanese version and other versions of the game, it's heavily implied that the depression caused all of his current problems. Regardless, one of the things that happen is that he becomes a judge master after he realizes that his son doesn't want to see him like that. He doesn't want him to see a slob. He doesn't want him to see the alcoholic that he's become, and he redeems his character. His character ends up playing a critical part in the story afterward. He helps out Marsh, he helps out his son Mute, and he ends up helping to be this character that you can look up to like a judge master should be looked up to. And that's where the symbolism comes from. Yes, root beer is beer in name and name alone, but it is not what it is actually defined as. It's not an alcoholic drink. It has become something different. And that's what actually Sid is now. He is something completely different, but he still has that alcoholic nature in his past. Hence, root beer. Now, is that a little bit more of a stretch from the first one? A little bit, but here's the thing. When you have these references, you don't want to have the references do the same thing over and over again. You don't want them all to be literal, for example. You want them to stretch out their connections so that people really think about what the connection is. And I do see a connection with this poster to the past games. Now, some of the references are a little bit more straightforward. For example, the Aldgoat on this poster here. That is a reference to an enemy type in the Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn. Aldgoats are denizens of rocky mountainous regions, indiscriminately eating any vegetation they happen to cross. They have thick hides, and basically you could skin them for leather in the game. Now, I don't want to do too many of these. You can find a lot of these little references here and there without symbolism. You can hit the Phoenix, you get a bunch of the old enemy types and things like that, but honestly, that's not what this video is going to focus on, but I want to make sure that you guys know, yes, those references are actually there as well. Well, okay, what about some other locations within this world? How about the Hammerhead store? Well, if you look on the wall, you find Junin Super Engine Oil, and yes, I know I mispronounced that. For you Final Fantasy VII fanatics out there, that was a major city and military installation in the game. It used to be a peaceful fishing village before Shinra came in, and all of a sudden, now they've got an airfield, they've got things blocking out the sun, you know, the typical horrible corporate bullshit. Now, outside of Hammerhead, you will see this sign, Bonora White. What could that be a reference to? It looks like there's a tree, but it's upside down. It's almost got... It's not an apple, but it's a little bit weird in terms of that little circle in the middle of it, so I'm wondering what it is. Well, of course, this is another reference. See, Bonora White has actually been in this series before this. It's also known as a dumb apple, but it's a fruit found in the village of Bonora in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. Yes, I know a lot of people didn't play Crisis Core because it was on the PSP, but it was a pretty good game. There was a character named Genesis in the game that wanted to eat this fruit with his hero Sephiroth. He looked up to him as sort of a, I don't want to say a god, but basically somebody he wanted to be as he grew up. He never did that, but he did it with Zack in the game. Basically, Zack had been injected with Sephiroth's cells, and he was the hero replacement for Sephiroth after he went all, crazy and everything. But hey, that's for another time in terms of that story. Just realize that, once again, this is a reference to an older Final Fantasy game. Now, I want to shift direction a tiny bit here for some odd world building. Now, many of you probably know about the Cup Noodles quest in this game, which is a little bit strange because that's a real-life product. But that's not the only real-life product in this game. For example, you've got this. Now, I didn't see this one at first. It was my friend Andrea who actually saw this American Express logo in the window. Now, I get product placement, I really do, but the core audience that is playing your game, how many people are going to notice that? And in particular, how many people are actually going to do something about that? Like, oh, American Express is in this game. Maybe I should try it. I get the cup noodles one. It's a little bit intriguing. Like, okay, is cup noodles really that good? But here, no. The thing is, I like a little bit of this crossover. Now, I don't necessarily like advertisements in games, blatantly beaten over your head over and over again, despite the fact that, yes, I did like the Cup Noodles side quest. I think that was handled very well. But I like these little connections to the real world. It gives a little bit of fantasy to it in terms of, is this real? Could this be real? Yes, of course, there is no American Express in that universe. How could those companies exist in both timelines, aka our real timeline and this fantasy timeline? But it just poses the question, and that's enough in my opinion. But it's not just Cup Noodles and American Express that shows up in this world. For example, one of the biggest events of the game, or at least one that is built up to, is the eventual wedding between Lady Lunafreya and Noctis. In fact, there's a whole entire subquest regarding the wedding dress itself. The funny thing, though, is that the wedding dress is actually designed by a real wedding dress designer. But this isn't some in-game designer. Vivienne Westwood is a British fashion designer and businesswoman, largely responsible for bringing modern punk and nouveau fashions into the mainstream. Now, you may be shocked to know that this isn't the first instance of the fashion world and the Final Fantasy world coming together. In fact, the first time was Final Fantasy XIII, specifically Lightning. She ends up being a model for Louis Vuitton. Yes, it's a little bit strange, isn't it? A video game character modeling real-life products. And in fact, there's a whole interview with the character of Lightning about her experience. Yes, it's a little strange, but it does do this weird sort of cross-promotion between the two. I can't really find any data on how effective this sort of advertising concept was in terms of Square Enix and Louis Vuitton. Obviously, I'm not the target audience of it, but hey, if it worked, I guess it worked? Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. Now, I could have gone on into all the references in the game. Phoenix, all the little different enemy types from the old game, but I wanted to keep it to the more obscure ones or the ones that I think people would miss. But did you see other Final Fantasy references? Leave your thoughts and comments, if you did see them, in the comments section below. But this is Dragnix signing out, and as always, keep on gaming. As to what's coming up on the channel next, I'm not exactly sure. It may be the Last Guardian review. I've been live streaming it more, but I need to actually finish it, as well as maybe a half Genie Hero review. Anyway, I'll see you later.